Hey there guys, DMO73 here, bringing you another feature match for the week. Today I am showing off some footage that I got from Collinsville between my friends David Curris and Jeff Young. David is playing a Val 2 control and Jeff is playing a red, blue, green Charlotte aggro. So I watched this footage and this is going to be kind of a teaching feature match. There's a lot of things that kind of happen in this feature match on both sides that kind of need to be talked about, and so that's what we're going to be doing today. So Jeff's going to roll an 8, David's going to roll a 10, he's going to put himself on the play. So the whole purpose of the Charlotte aggro is to play the things like Cheshire Cat and then kind of make them better, and then refill your hand and then continue to just kind of throw creatures at the board, whereas Val 2 control is just what it sounds like. You use ramp creatures, it's kind of like a green Val. You use ramp creatures to make Val 2 flip kind of faster and cancel spells and things like that, and then you have the Sacred Beasts to kind of back up your finale. So off the top, he plays Apollo and Bow, and then plays a first turn Sacred Elf. Goes to Jeff, who gets a Vaporization and has to pay 300 life for it. And then he plays a Cheshire Cat, so he energizes into Cheshire Cat, which is a really risky move. If David had had a Wall of Wind, that would have been severely punished. Jeff got lucky there in the fact that he didn't run into the Wall of Wind, but it was probably not a necessary move to go there. And then he just swings in for 7 damage. Goes to David's turn, taps for a second stone. You see he's got a Seal of Wind and Light in his hand. And he's got lots of open will, so he's probably going to be able to cancel whatever it is Jeff plays next turn. Jeff taps for a second stone, hits a second Vaporization here, pays another 300 life so that he can play it up. So the Cheshire Cat has swiftness because he put a Lancelot underneath it, because Cheshire Cat gets those kind of extra abilities based on what gets exiled by her. He's going to swing in for the 7 damage. And David's going to take that. So taking him down to 26. Already in 2 turns, 14 damage is pretty strong, especially since Val 2. And he's going to tap out to play Lance. So this is another situation where tapping out against a control deck is probably not the best option. And the other problem here is David does not cancel that. He has the Seal of Wind and Light in his hand. He had no reason to not cancel it. He's using it to try to go get, he's going to try to wait instead to do a search after the upkeep, which kind of makes sense, but I would have only done that if I had already had a Death Scythe on board, because then I could have stolen the Lancelot. Like if I had Death Scythe already, then I could search for Leviathan, flip here, steal the Lancelot, and make some plays. But I don't have the Death Scythe here, so I probably would have just played more safe, especially since I had that second Artemis Bow, or potential to get a second Artemis Bow, and I would have just canceled the summon of Lancelot and only had to deal with Cheshire Cat. He would have gone up to 4 stones, he would have been able to play around a lot more. So instead he does Judgment here, and he swings into the Cheshire Cat. And he's just going to return the Lancelot from underneath the Cheshire Cat back to his hand with Cheshire Cat's ability. So this doesn't really advance the board state much at all for David, because what's happening here is now he's just going to have to take all of this damage probably that's coming at him. Even with the double bow, he knows he's going to have to deal with double lance. So Jeff taps here for a Hearthcore, and this is a moment where if I had been watching the match, I would have had to say something. He plays Priscia, Pursuant of Exploding Flame, and doesn't have a green source. So this is kind of the fault of both players. One, it's the fault of Jeff because he played a card that he couldn't. He wasn't really paying attention to his will sources. And 2, David also didn't notice this, and so he didn't stop it. So he swings in with the Lancelot, gets the 6 damage, swings in with the Priscia and gets Bow, and he takes 5 damage. So now David is already down to 9 life against a deck that has Burn and Reach. Wouldn't have necessarily been too bad if David had just remembered to play correctly and or Jeff had remembered that he doesn't have a green source. And here's the other problem here. He uses the Valentina God's Art to just steal the Lancelot while it's still rested, which doesn't really do anything for him. So in this situation, probably would have been the best would have been to swing into the Lancelot, to kill it, and then you have the will up to be able to steal a resonator next turn. So like you could have gone to Jeff's turn. Jeff could have played his first creature, and then you use Valentina Godsart to steal it, and then when Jeff tries to place a second creature, you now have a blocker. In this instance, it doesn't really matter because Jeff just has Double Thunder in hand, so it's just the game's already over at that point. So Jeff is going to take that game, and really the misplay with the Prisia didn't really matter because the Prisia just dealt 5 damage, and he had another Thunder in his hand, and a Blood Boil. So there was so much, there was over 2,000 damage in burn. So David was pretty much done at that point. But still important to know that you really need to pay attention to what your stones are, because in a tournament or something like that, if something got caught, you could get really, really punished for doing something like that. Maybe even a DQ. So at the minimalist, probably a game loss because it's an illegal action. So going into game 2, David's going to be back on the play, keeping himself on the play. Hopefully, he has that Leviathan and Death Scythe, which is actually a pretty good start for him. But he opens up with pretty much just a hand of Regalia, which isn't the best for him either, especially since he doesn't have a single bow in there. Or a ramp spell. So this is not looking good for David off the top. Probably wouldn't have kept the Maribel. Probably wouldn't have kept the Leviathan since I could search for it. So either way, I would have probably dug a little deeper. So that first turn, Cheshire Cat comes out. Again, very greedy of Jeff. He doesn't get punished by the Wallowan. Gets really lucky. Puts a Prisia on it and then does 7 damage right off the top to David. David finally does get that Sacred Elf. I probably would have played the blue source, tapped for blue. He does that because he wants to search for Regalia, which kind of makes sense. But in this situation, you're dealing with so much damage off the top that you don't want to get hurt. So Jeff swings in for 7 again with the Cheshire Cat. Takes him down to 26. Plays another Cheshire Cat. Also, again, gets really lucky that he doesn't get punished there with a cancel spell. David just did not see any of his cancel spells either of these games. Gets another 7 damage in. David's going to draw and then search. And he searches for an Apollo here, which I disagree with completely. I think he probably should have searched for a bow here, because he's going to flip. The best position here is to flip and steal one of those Cheshire Cats to try to make that happen. So he recovers after getting all his taps for his Regalia. He does Judgment, triggers, gets all those revealed 7 Kings of the land, plays the Apollo. So if he had played the bow here, he would have been in much better shape, because that bow would have been a bow with 4 counters, so he could swing into one of those Cheshire Cats, steal it, bring it on his side of the field. He's got a blocker now to be able to block the other Cheshire Cat, and if Jeff tries to make any of his stuff flying or super aggressive, then he just has the bow to be able to immediately kill it. In this position, he does not really have anything like that to be able to help. So he goes ahead and doesn't even swing, which I think is also a big mistake here. Jeff goes to his turn. Now Jeff has lots of wiggle room to be able to mess around with. That Valentina is flying, which is great, but it doesn't really matter because there's still one of those Cheshire Cats is going to get their damage through at this point, most likely. And he's got more creatures in his hand to be able to play. So there's the Leviathan. Jeff's just trying to see exactly how he's going to get this damage in. So he's going to swing for 7 with the Cheshire Cat. David is thinking about whether or not he wants to block this one. He needs to block the first one so he can steal it, but he decides to take the damage, which again, it doesn't make any sense. He should have blocked this one, stolen it, and then he would have had the Cheshire Cat to block the other Cheshire. So he swings with that Cheshire, blocks it. He's going to go ahead and see what Jeff's going to do. Jeff decides to trigger to try to bring his Pristia back to his hand. In response to that, we're going to see the tap of the Death Scythe. And now here's the thing. They both kind of misexecute Valentina here too. So the way this works, when Death Scythe is tapped, the creature will go to grave, and then Death Scythe will trigger, and the creature will come onto your field under your control, recovered. So that Cheshire Cat should actually be recovered. In this case, it should not be tapped. But because they're playing it this way, this essentially is just game for Jeff, because he's going to go ahead and just play that Pristia that he brought back to his hand, get the 12 damage in, and then sacrifice it to Leviathan. So lots of kind of interesting play on both sides, maybe just kind of a good teaching game. Go ahead and like, comment, and subscribe, and until next time, this is CMO73 signing off.